Thank you very much for the invitation to come back again as well. So, those of you that were here in 22 may remember my presentation on biocontrol and just how shocking it was. Guy down in Otago nearly had a heart attack. So I was told, health and safety, if there's any more shocks in my presentations, I've got to give you a warning. You have been warned. Okay. We've known about the importance of soil since the dawn of civilization, but we seem to keep forgetting it. This was a fascinating recent study. Nearly 60% of all living things, including everything in the ocean, make soil their home. It's the most important, the most diverse ecosystem on the planet, and too often we treat it like dirt. It's right at the heart of all the planetary systems that keep us humans alive. It's literally the child, the prodigy of climate and the rocks. It's key in the carbon cycle, the water cycle. Most of our reactive nitrogen is stored in soil. And as that previous study showed, it's the foundation for most life on Earth. But we treat it like dirt far too much. And if we don't start looking after it better, it's not going to be able to look after us. It's also the foundation of terroir. It's basically the soil and climate, the weather, create terroir, along with, of course, whichever grapes you're growing. We unfortunately have no control over the weather, but we actually have quite a lot of control over what we do to our soil and how it behaves. So what are the levers you can pull to change how your soil's behaving and improve its health? Well, there's been a complete revolution, a paradigm shift in soil science. This is proper toys out of cot kind of revolution. What we used to focus on and think about was essentially residue going onto the surface of soil, leaves, compost, manure, those kinds of things. Small organisms break that up, microbes hook into it and mineralize it, turn it back from organic compounds into inorganic compounds again. We used to think that the simple compounds, sugars, proteins, oils, fats, decomposed really quickly. The more complex stuff, polymers like cellulose, took weeks to years to decompose. And then the really tough stuff, the woody lignified material, took centuries to millennia and eventually ended up as humus. Now, humus here means organic matter that is recalcitrant. It resists decaying further. And they are busy updating the textbooks. So this is the new paradigm. The old one's not completely wrong because clearly dead stuff ends up on the surface of soil. Little critters break it up and the microbes hook into it. This stuff is now called POM, particulate organic matter. This only represents about 20% of the organic matter in soil. Even the tough stuff, the woody material, decomposes within a few years to a few decades at most. And shockingly, humus doesn't exist. Yes, I know, the jokes just get worse and worse. So humus, this recalcitrant molecule, simply doesn't exist. For us in organics, this is a real eye-opener because we've been saying that humus is the foundation of soil health. We are now sure that humus is an artifact of the alkali extraction methods used last century. When we directly look at soil using whizzy new techniques, humus can't be found. Indeed, it doesn't even make any sense. We start off with these big organic pieces of matter. They're broken down into smaller and smaller things on the way to becoming inorganic compounds. And suddenly, poof, out of somewhere, this big complex molecule appears that's somehow resistant to decay. Doesn't actually make any sense. The new stuff's over here on the right. Plants put out through their roots between 10 to 40% of the photosynthates they make from sunlight as root exudates. These are simple soluble compounds, the sugars, the fats and stuff that we thought decomposed really quickly, and these are feeding a vast density and diversity of microbes living around the plant roots. These return the favor by providing the plant with water, nutrients, protection from pests and pathogens. Different plant species produce different exudates that feed different microbes. Plants can even change the exudates they make when they need help from particular microbes. The microbes consume these exudates, and the microbes themselves are also consumed, so these nutrients and energy in these exudates cycle through the soil ecosystem, and they eventually end up inside soil particles in tiny little cracks, particularly inside clay. And this stuff is called mineral-associated organic matter, which has this absolutely hideous acronym, MAOM, or MAOM. We can't even agree how to pronounce this thing. Key is 80% of the organic matter in soil originates from plant root exudates. So it's these exudates that is driving the soil ecology, excuse me, and also creating this long-lived form of organic matter. MAOM is what now lasts for centuries to millennia. What this is telling us, it's not this old concept we had, particularly in organics, about compost and residues, the tops of cover crops. It's living roots that are driving the soil ecosystem and soil health. So we kind of been thinking about plants the wrong way round. Kind of high school science, plants take up water and nutrients from the soil and use it to build their foliage. Well, what's actually going on is plants are using the energy from sunlight and sucking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, because plants are 45% carbon and 45% oxygen and 6% hydrogen. 96% carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen. Those are all principally coming out of the atmosphere. So they're taking sunlight, carbon dioxide, oxygen, hydrogen, turning it into organic compounds, exudates, and shoving those out into the soil to drive the soil ecosystem. So what this tells us, if we want to maximize soil health, we need a diversity of living plant roots year-round. If you've heard that before, that's because the regenerative ag people have picked this up, or they've been fed this science as it has been evolving. That's why they're into their diverse cover crops, their diverse pastures, and keeping the ground covered, because they've been fed this science. So, we come to your absolutely bog-standard vineyard. What's the problem here? This is what good old John van der Linden calls the death zone. What's the problem? There are a lot of problems here. Whether it's herbicides or cultivation, we have bare earth. There is a lack of living roots in that ground, and so it's in poor soil health. That's why the herbicide strips get so damn hard. Yes, there are vine roots in there, but it's one species, and it's dormant half the year. If a plant is dormant, it's not producing root exudates. If you are cultivating, I actually think this is worse than herbicides. And this is coming from a guy that spent 30 years working in organics, because we've now got loose soil with no plants in it, really highly prone to erosion. Herbicides, the soil's harder, but it's still prone to erosion because it lacks the roots holding it together and the vegetation protecting the surface. And of course, we have herbicide resistance everywhere. So we need to find something different, some different way of managing this stuff. So for me, long term, we need to revegetate the undervine. This is what I call living mulches, and John's come up with a sustainable living sward system, which I have to say is a hell of a gobful, so I'm going to avoid it like the plague and just call them living mulches. So what do these things do? These are living year-round plants, so they're producing exudates year-round, feeding the soil microbes, improving soil health. We're increasing above-ground biodiversity. Plants are the foundation of ecosystems, so if you increase the diversity of plants, the rest of biodiversity will follow. We're going to minimize herbicide use. Indeed, they can still be valuable tools. You might be wanting a clover living mulch. It gets invaded by grasses. Herbicides are a useful tool, a selective herbicide to take out the grasses and return it back to clover. Conservation biocontrol of pests. Been doing a whole load of work in this space in the Lighter Touch project. Go and have a look at that and the potential for improving terroir. So these living mulches are very much an ecological approach. Ecology is the science of how organisms interact with each other and their non-living environment. And on that insanely simple concept, the most hugely complicated science is built. So living mulches are therefore a form of intercropping. Intercropping is the opposite of monoculture. It's growing two or more plant species together. And so I refer to these as service crops. They're providing services to the vine and the wider vineyard as well. And intercropping is like a form of marriage. Some marriages work really well, others not quite so well. So we have to find service crop species that are going to play nicely with the vines. And so we're getting into the science of plant-plant interactions. And if you want to really nerd out on some science, there was a recent issue of this journal dedicated entirely to this topic. And there's a number of really good review articles that are open access, so you can go and have a look at them and read them. It's really fascinating stuff. The problem is, it's insanely complicated. It's far beyond the kind of standard competition for light, water, nutrients than we think of in terms of plant interactions. All kinds of really complex stuff is going on underground. Plants can detect each other through multiple mechanisms. Changes to the light spectrum, volatile chemicals, underground root chemicals, fungal networks that are connecting these things together, even electricity. These interactions can be as complex as animal interactions. Think of a flock of sheep or a herd of cows. And there's multiple types in here, and they can be positive, negative, neutral. So as you can see from this complicated little wee diagram, there's potentially a lot of stuff going on here. So, a bit like Kraz, start with some goals. What are you trying to achieve with your living mulch? Are you wanting weed suppression? I've seen some crazy stuff being done over the last couple of decades. Tiny little native plants that are really shite competitors being put underneath vines. And you're kind of going, virtually anything is going to outcompete those. You want a big thuggish plant, something like a red clover. If you want to get some nitrogen fixation, free nitrogen fertilizer, you're going to need legumes in there. Conservation biocontrol, just general biodiversity will be really good, but maybe some targeted species as well. Soil health, diverse root exudates, you need a diversity of plant species. And these are all pasture species, herbaceous plants, pasture species. Why go for really crazy, obscure, expensive stuff? Just go for the easy, cheap stuff. And if you've had a long-term herbicide strip, a lot of experience in the Lighter Touch project, you have to cultivate that ground to get effective establishment. If you try and establish on top of a herbicide strip, good luck with that. With all this complexity, it's basically impossible to theoretically predict which kind of marriage is going to work. The only way to work out what will work is on farm, on vineyard rather, trial and error. Your soil, climate, your grapes are all going to change what is a successful living mulch species. Key thing is there's no light competition against the vines, because herbaceous species generally only grow half a metre tall at most. We do have a few rough rules of thumb. Grasses are the most competitive plants with woody plants, because they have fine, fibrous, competitive root systems in the same space as the feeder roots on the vines. Legumes, particularly tap-rooted, are likely to be the least competitive because they're in a different soil volume from the feeder roots, and they're supplying nitrogen to the vines, so they may actually vigor up the vines. And what we call forbs or herbs, which in pasture speak means everything that's not a grass or a legume, they're so different, they're so diverse, it's a case-by-case basis. People talk about cover crops. Here I'm meaning cover crops in terms of annual plant species. So stuff like cereals, brassicas, and the annual clovers. While I view perennial living mulches as the end game, these are difficult things to get to work. So a halfway house may be to be growing annual cover crops, particularly over winter, because they can't compete with your vines when your vines are dormant. They're just sat there. But we do need to be careful of soil carryover. If you plant a big, vigorous cereal, It's going to suck all the nitrogen out of the soil. You might kill it before the vines wake up, but there's no nitrogen in the soil, so when the vines do wake up, they have nitrogen starvation. So, pulling all that together, soil, it's the foundation of virtually everything. It's astonishing when you start thinking about its role on this planet, just how critically important it is. It's what's helping keep us alive and allowing our civilization to persist. So we need to look after it better than we have done. This soil science revolution, this paradigm change, clearly shows that we need to keep Papua-Tuanuku clothed in vegetation, with roots producing root exudates. And we need to let this stuff grow long. To me, talking about all this climate change stuff, the easiest win on a vineyard for reducing your diesel use is to leave the damn mower in the shed. We don't need to mow all this grass all the time. Most of it's just aesthetic. Burning diesel for aesthetics has to stop in my book. So sometimes you do have to mow this stuff, but don't mow it down to the boards. Leave it as long as you can. So long term, we have to get rid of this herbicide and this cultivation strip. It's going to be a journey to get there, but we need to get on with it. Thank you very much.